guys, I'm trying to do all 50 states. Today we are on Louisiana, and this is a big one because my mom had a bunch that she wanted me to do from Louisiana. My sister had some she wanted me to do from Louisiana, but I chose my own, and I'm going to talk about a kid who killed his father and then found out he was a missing person. Can you guess who it is? It's Anthony Templet. He's also known as AJ Templet, however you want to call him. I'm going to call him Anthony, though. There is a Netflix documentary about Anthony Templet, and it's kind of all over the place. Like, it was really interesting. It was definitely something that I talked about for quite a long time after I watched it. But I'm going to go in, like, chronological order of these events because that's just the way my brain works. I get confused when we jump back and forth between, like, 2000 to 2012 to 2006. Like, I get so confused. So I'm going to go in chronological order. Let's start off by talking about when Bert Templet meets Anthony's mother, Teresa Webb. They meet in the mid-90s when Teresa is working at a crab shack and Bert is in town for work. So he comes in and she forgets his salad and she's apologizing, and Bert says, I wasn't going to eat it anyways. Teresa laughs and they just like hit it off. It seems like you blink your eyes and Teresa is living with Bert. They just hit it off so fast, so hard, so quick because Bert was just so lively and always smiling, and Teresa just felt so complete with him in her life. She already had 2 kids prior, and Bert was making pretty good money too. So she felt the stability and that he would be a really good father figure. So very shortly after meeting, Bert gets a job opportunity in Houston, Texas. And Teresa is going for it. She's like, all right, we're going to Houston, Texas. Teresa's family was not really supportive of that. They were kind of like, girl, you just met him. You have 2 kids. What are you doing? But she goes for it. She moves to Houston. And once they get to Houston, things start to go downhill. Teresa's family started to realize that Teresa was getting pretty quiet. She wasn't calling nearly as much. And it seemed like there was just something going on, you know, when you're preoccupied, even when you're talking to somebody, you're still thinking about something else. That's kind of the impression Teresa's family was getting. And it turned out that Bert was wanting Teresa's attention all the time. He didn't want her paying attention to the kids. He didn't want her, focusing on the lawn. Like, he wanted her attention 24/7. And Teresa she was kind of like, dude, what is your deal? Like, why are you up my butt so much? Then she finds out he was doing cocaine, and he was getting so irritated so fast over every little thing that he started putting his hands on Teresa, and not only physically abusing her, but financially abusing her, emotionally abusing her, and mentally abusing her. And it did not matter if Teresa's family was visiting, if his family was visiting, and if the neighbors were visiting, he was beating on Teresa either way. And then Teresa gets pregnant with little baby Anthony. And Anthony is named after Bert. Bert's full name is Bert Anthony, and Anthony's name is Anthony Joseph. So Teresa still, honored Bert by naming their son after him, but she was worried. Bert ends up beating Teresa even when she's pregnant and going to jail. Then Bert beat Teresa again after Anthony was born, and he goes to jail again. And then I think that was the time he went to jail for 6 months because of it, but Teresa still stuck around. And Bert comes back to beat Teresa again. But 2 of those assault charges were dismissed. Bert starts telling Teresa that they need to get life insurance. And Teresa was like, okay, let's get life insurance. But she doesn't put the life insurance in his name because she's smart. She knows that he wants life insurance so he can murder her and get the money. So Teresa starts leaving these little notes around the house where it says Bert did it. So if she does mysteriously pass away, then you will find the note saying that Bert did it. And then one day a man comes to the door and he's banging on the door. He's saying, hey, Bert just hired me as a hitman to murder you. I'm not going to do it, but you need to get out of here right now. So Teresa is gathering up all her things, trying to get out of there. She's gathering up Anthony's things, and then Bert comes storming in the door, and he's PO'd. He is on the phone. He's telling his friends, we're going to kill him, blah, blah, blah. He's a traitor. And then he leaves. And you kind of have to understand domestic violence situation. When a woman tries to leave, that's when her life is most at risk. And that's something your intuition even tells you. So the fact that Teresa stayed is not uncommon. It doesn't mean she's stupid. It doesn't mean that she enjoys the domestic violence. It just means she did not feel it was a safe time to leave. Bert was gone all night, and then he comes back the next morning, and he is just still so furious, still putting his hands on Teresa and just acting absolutely terrible. So then one day, Teresa is making, I scratched my neck. It was itchy, and I have like terrible skin. When I scratch it, it turns all red. But Teresa was making some bacon and eggs for Bert's parents and Bert and Anthony. At this time, Anthony is about 2 or 3 years old. This is about 2000. So Anthony was born in 2001. So this is like 2003, 2004 time. Well, Teresa was making eggs and bacon and just making a nice breakfast. They're all chatting it up in the kitchen, enjoying each other's company when Bert comes in. And Bert looks at the food, grabs a glass of milk off the kitchen counter, and just slams it in Teresa's face. And in the other hand, he has a handful of Teresa's hair. Well, he slams the milk into her and then just takes her head and just starts bashing it. Teresa reports that Bert ripped out that fistful of hair. And Bert's parents are screaming like, Bert, please stop, get off of her, blah, blah, blah. What are you doing? And then they offer Teresa safety. They say, hey, I will take you to the bus station. And Teresa took up the offer. She's like, yeah, absolutely, get me out of here. And she goes to pick up Anthony. But Bert rips Anthony up and he's squeezing this toddler. And he says, you're not taking my effing kid. And he would not let go of Anthony. But Teresa knew she needed to get out of there in order to save Anthony. So they're on the way to the bus station. And Teresa says, just let me out. And they're like, we're on the freeway. What are you talking about? And she's like, I need to get out right now. She had a little bit of like mistrust, but also fear, anxiety of the whole situation, and she ends up walking the rest of the way to the bus station. She probably wanted to be a little alone with her thoughts too, honestly. Like, that is a frightening situation, and I, as a mother, could not imagine having to leave with my child there. That, you know, you need to think about a lot. Anthony stays with his dad while Teresa goes home to her mom. Her mother said when she gets off the bus, she hardly recognizes Teresa at all. Teresa was rail thin with bruises from head to toe, and her hair was thinning. Most likely from that fistful of hair that was ripped out earlier that morning. But also, how many other times did Bert rip out her hair? When Teresa is able to compose herself, get out of bed and on her feet, she goes to the local courts and files for custody of Anthony. Then she drives to Houston to go get Anthony, and everything was gone. Bert was gone, Anthony was gone, and this is a matter of a week. Bert picks up and he leaves with Anthony, and now she is full-blown panicking. She's calling Bert's parents, and Bert's parents are like, I didn't know he left, and they probably didn't, to be completely honest, but they were no help. So Teresa is freaking out. She has the courts. The court sent out an order for Bert to bring Anthony to Teresa, but he never shows up. He doesn't show up for any of the court dates, and he doesn't bring Anthony. Teresa was able to get in a custody court case in Baton Rouge, Louisiana for Anthony. And so she's driving back and forth from Texas to Louisiana trying to get custody of Anthony. And mind you, she has 2 other kids at home. She has to work in order to pay her bills. And she has to have that, the time with the other kids. Kids take a lot of time, school activities, if they play sports. And she's trying to have this stable life for those kids, also trying to get Anthony back. And it's wearing her thin. When Teresa goes to Louisiana to actually go and get Anthony, Bert locks the door, and she can hear Anthony on the other side of the door, screaming, Mommy, please, Mommy, come pick me up. Mommy, I want to go home. And Bert has the door locked, and there's nothing Teresa can do because the court case is still pending, and Teresa just wants her son. Bert does not even actually want Anthony. It's just another form of domestic violence where he has Anthony and he's telling Teresa, look, just because you're not here with me doesn't mean I can't still make your life a living hell. Finally, the court case does get resolved, and Anthony goes home with Teresa, and everything was so nice. Teresa had her babies, all 3 of them. Anthony was enjoying playing in their big Texas backyard. But in the meantime, Bert is hiring a private investigator to stalk Teresa while he continues to do his thing in Louisiana. This private investigator had notebooks full of what time Teresa leaves for work, what school her kids are going to, what time does the bus pick them up, what time is Anthony usually playing in the front yard. And Teresa's mom even pointed out, she was like, there's a car over there, and I've seen it a lot lately. Whose is that? And Teresa was kind of just like, oh, I don't know, I definitely, if I saw a car I didn't really recognize, wouldn't expect it to be somebody stalking me. Unless there's somebody in there with binoculars, but just seeing a car, no, I'd probably have the same reaction, I don't know. But on June 15th, 2007, Teresa decides she wants to go out of town with a friend, and it was just for a couple hours. It wasn't a full day or a weekend or anything like that. It was just a couple hours. So she asked her mom, hey, can you watch the kiddos while I go with so-and-so to the next town over? And they were probably going shopping or something. So the mom said, yeah, of course. And just like any other grandma watching her grandkids, they're running in and out of the door, just playing, hanging out. And Anthony he's 5 at this time. Almost 6, but he's 5. So he goes in and out playing, and then all of a sudden a police officer knocks on the door. And Teresa's mom is like, what's going on? Did Anthony, throw a rock at a car that was going by? Not expecting this police officer to say, Bert filed for emergency temporary custody of Anthony, and we need to take him. What? So there's nothing she can do. This cop took Anthony by the hand and walked him to the police car, put him in the back of the police car. So this is 2007. cell phones aren't a big thing, but I do believe the grandmother used the house phone to call Teresa's cell phone and tell her everything that happens. And Teresa comes speeding home, and she's hysterical, and she's asking her mom, like, why did you let them take her? She was hysterical, and she was yelling at her mom, like, why did you let them take him? How could they have taken him? What paperwork did they have? Are you certain it was a cop? And it was a cop. So the grandma couldn't have done anything different. And what happened was just miscommunication, which is not an excuse. Baton Rouge Children's Services did not look into the background of Bert for the state of Texas. They did not see all the charges against Bert, even the ones that were dropped. They didn't see Teresa's record. And Bert was saying that she was a drug addict and all this other crazy stuff, saying that she wasn't mentally stable, and that for the best interest of Anthony, it would be for him to have custody. Teresa is driving back and forth from Texas to Louisiana, trying to find where her son is, where Bert is, even a phone number for Bert, even a phone number for Anthony, and she's not getting anywhere. So she prints out $1,000 worth of missing children's poster and just plaster it all over Texas and all over Louisiana. She's going to the courts, and Anthony is just not being handed over. Bert is not showing up to these court cases, and she's at a loss. Like, Anthony is now missing. Teresa uses all of her savings, and she's going from paycheck to paycheck, paying for lawyers, paying to stay at hotels in Louisiana, hoping that she just sees like a glimpse of Bert at a grocery store with Anthony there. But she can't find them. They're not where they were. Bert's parents don't know where they are. And he's nowhere to be found to be served papers for the court case. Meanwhile, about a year after that situation happened, Bert is telling Anthony that his mom is a drug addict and he doesn't know where Anthony's mom is. The audacity. And telling him that, oh, she just never wanted you. She just handed you over to me. And Anthony just doesn't have any recollection of being taken by the cop. He just doesn't remember that. And it probably is like trauma or something that blocked that out. But Bert meets Susan. And Susan has a son about the same age as Anthony. I think her son, whose name is Peyton, is 2 years younger than Anthony. But it seems great. Like, Anthony now has somebody to play with. He has like a mother figure, and Bert and Susan get married. They meet in a sports bar with a blind date. They had a mutual friend, and they just really hit it off. Susan talks about she met Anthony when Anthony was about 6 or 7, and I think that her and Bert get married in 2008. So Anthony is this very like spunky, funny, goofy kid, but very fast he turns quiet and almost emotionless, almost like he was scared to talk. So Susan had her son in public school, just all growing up. He was a very normal kid, but Bert kept saying that his mother homeschools Anthony, but she didn't. And, Susan, being married to Bert, very quickly found out that was not the case. So about 2011, she really starts questioning Anthony's education. At the age of 10, she decides to just step in and start teaching Anthony how to spell his name. She starts teaching Anthony the uppercase and lowercase letters and how to write out numbers. And Anthony just adores the adult attention. Like the attention that isn't negative, but a helping hand. And Susan realizes that. At the age of 16, Susan starts telling Bert, we need to get Anthony in school. Like, Peyton is in school. Why is Anthony not in school? So Bert is like, okay, let's take him. And I think Bert knows exactly how that would have turned out, because the school says that Anthony has a 3rd grade level of education, and that he would have to go into the 3rd grade at 16, and that would be extremely uncomfortable for Anthony, so they decide to continue homeschooling him. But once Susan gets to, okay, look, Anthony can write in a full sentence, Anthony can read a book, Anthony knows how to write his name. Well, then she asks Anthony, what is our address? And Anthony gives her the zip code. She says, no, that's the zip code. What is your address? And Anthony's like, I don't know. At the age of 16, he doesn't know his address. So Susan then starts trying to teach him more math. And he was able to do adding and subtracting. But then when I got to division and I got to like the address, and it was reading higher than a children's book, Bert shuts it down. He says, Anthony doesn't need to know that stuff. Like, quit crowding him. You're stressing him out. Leave him alone. And Susan's like, what are you talking about? Bert's reason behind this is that stupid people are easier to control than smart people. And also, if Bert put Anthony in a public school, then his name and his address is out there, and Anthony could be found by his mother. But all in all, Bert needed control of Anthony in every single aspect. Not just Anthony, Bert needed control of the entire family. Bert had cameras in every single room of the house, including the bathrooms and Anthony's room, his bedroom. Why do you need cameras on a 16-year-old boy like that? Like, he needs his own privacy. But Bert had cameras all around the outside of the house and every single room inside the house except the master bedroom. Susan reports seeing Anthony be beat at least weekly and being abused verbally at least every other day, if not every single day. Peyton, Susan's son, who is 2 years younger than Anthony, said that Anthony hung out in his bedroom all the time, because if he went outside of his bedroom, it was like walking on eggshells. Any move, even catching Bert on the side of the eye, led to some form of abuse for Anthony. So Anthony stayed in his bedroom all the time. He had no interaction with anybody. Peyton and Susan also said that sometimes the house would be so quiet, you could hear like a pin drop. And then the next second, Bert is screaming and throwing plates and cups and just anything at a wall, at a person, at the TV. Bert would just explode. And Peyton said that one time Bert even threw a Jenga box at the back of his head for no reason. Susan reports that Bert had an app that would tell him when her car engine would turn on and off. By March 19th, 9 years after marrying Bert, Susan leaves. And Peyton had left a little bit prior to this. Peyton actually went to his dad's and told his dad, like, hey, we need to save Anthony. There's nothing good happening in that house. So Peyton's dad, the only thing you can really do is just call the police. And Peyton's dad called the police, And the police get there, and Anthony is so petrified. Not only does he like not speak to people, but now authority is questioning him, and Anthony is just, sweating profusely, and he says, "No, everything is fine here. Like, please leave us alone." So there was nothing really the police could do. Susan got beat so bad by Bert that her teeth had been punched out. He threatened to cut her into tiny pieces. So Susan leaves, and she files a protection order against Bert. Susan really, really wanted to take Anthony with her, but he said, "You don't know the things I could do to you, little missy." Susan was afraid that if she tried to take Anthony, she would be murdered. So she kind of, stepped back. Bert forces Anthony to get a job at a nursery, and his coworkers said that he was a bit off. Like, he would go to work, he wouldn't talk to anybody, and then he'd just leave. And a lot of people do that, but like in this case, he did something, and this lady praised him, and she was like, "Hey, high five, Anthony." And he had no idea what high five was, and she was just like, "Okay." And she just explained what a high five was. Like, I couldn't imagine explaining what a high five was to a 17-year-old, but she's nice and was just like, "Oh, it's where you take your hands and you go, and it means good job." A month later, after Susan leaves on June 3rd, 2019, Anthony is just minding his own business, and Bert is home because Bert had recently lost his job. So on top of losing his wife, he loses his job too. And he's just, drinking the day away. Well, he asks Anthony to see his phone, and Anthony was like, whatever. Like, he's a control freak. Of course, he goes through his kid's phone. But then Bert does not see any communication to Susan. And he starts freaking out, saying, like, "You're deleting your call log." And Anthony's like, "No, I'm not." Well, Bert at this point has no F's given. He lost his job. He lost his wife. He's probably about to lose his house. So he starts beating on Anthony. And sometimes he would beat Anthony for hours. Well, Anthony's literally being beat for no reason. Anthony's being beat because he didn't talk to Susan, because he's not supposed to talk to Susan. So he was going to get beat either way. But Anthony manages to get up and get past Bert, and he runs into Bert's bedroom, where he locks the bedroom, and he gets his dad's guns out. And I'm saying guns as in 2 different guns. Bert is banging on the door, and the crime scene shows that the door was getting busted off the hinges. And Bert finally stops. I don't know if he was like taking a breather, but he stops. Anthony unlocks the door, and Anthony's holding a gun. And Bert says, "What are you going to do, shoot me?" And doesn't say anything and just shoots his dad. Well, his dad turns around, and he's running towards the bathroom, and he's like saying something along the lines of like, "Don't shoot." And Anthony shoots him again in the head. And then Anthony shoots one more time, but it misses. Bert dies 3 days later in the hospital. And Susan does go to visit him in the hospital. Of course, Anthony calls the police, and Anthony has no idea how the legal system works at all. Anthony thinks that he's going to get like 3 days in jail for shooting and killing his dad. But he has a wake-up call. He's in the interrogation room. In the interrogation room, Anthony's very open and honest. He's a good kid. They ask him questions like, was there any windows in the bedroom? And he was like, "Oh yeah, there's 2 windows." And they're like, "So you had a way to escape where you didn't have to shoot your dad?" And Anthony's like, "Yeah, probably." Anthony doesn't ask for a lawyer. Anthony doesn't know to ask for a lawyer. Then they ask, "What's your birthday?" Anthony didn't know his birthday. They ask, "What's your address?" Anthony has no idea what his address is. Eventually, the interrogation ends, and everyone had more questions than answers at this point. They're like, what is wrong with this kid? So, with probable cause, they could arrest Anthony, and then after the dad died 3 days later, he was charged with the murder. While he's sitting in jail, he gets a call from somebody, and this person is like, "Hey, Anthony, I found your mom." Anthony's like, "What? My mom?" And she's like, "Yeah, you have siblings too." And he was like, "I do?" He's like, "I thought I was an only child." Well, this lady from, I don't know what company it is. It's some DNA company. Well, she hears the story and she starts researching, and somehow she finds Anthony's sister, Natasha, and sends Natasha a message over Facebook explaining who she is. And Natasha immediately recognizes Anthony from Anthony's mugshot. Natasha sends back a missing person poster. And it turned out that Teresa had been carrying around that missing persons poster all these years later. 12 years she was carrying around missing person poster for her own child. This was just so shocking because Anthony and Susan both thought that Teresa was dead. Charges were able to be dropped down to negligent homicide. So March 2001, Anthony was able to walk free on 5 years probation. And with his probation, he has to finish counseling. He has to get his GED. He has to keep a full-time job. The courts just found that keeping him locked up in a jail cell was doing him no good. He needed to be out living somewhat a normal life because he had been held basically in a jail cell his entire life. His entire childhood was robbed from him because this guy was just so disgusting. He wanted to hurt Teresa, and in the long run, he hurt Teresa and he hurt Anthony. Teresa and Anthony did get together, and it was such a beautiful reunion. But that is all I have for Louisiana. I am doing this video in my bedroom again because my boyfriend is in the living room watching some fight, and I didn't want to do it throughout the week because throughout the week it's just me and the kiddo, so I have to really attend to my kids, and if I do it in the living room while my kids are there, then I get comments about how it's inappropriate. But I do appreciate people like having my kids' best interests in mind. I think all of us should have our kids' best interests in mind. You know, love and look out for your neighbor's kid type deal. But I love and I appreciate all of you. Thank you for watching my video. Take care.